My hands were still shaking as I gripped the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing before walking into my parents' house. Through the living room window, I could see them all gathered for Sunday dinner. My perfect sister Madison with her surgeon husband, my brother Tyler showing off his new promotion, and my parents holding court like always. At 32, I was the family disappointment, the one who'd moved to New York to chase dreams and came back empty-handed. Well, not entirely empty-handed, but they didn't know that yet. "Look who finally decided to show up," Dad announced as I walked in, his voice carrying that familiar edge of disapproval. "Let me guess. Traffic from your studio apartment was terrible." The room erupted in knowing chuckles. I forced a smile, setting down the expensive wine I'd brought, a detail they'd miss, assuming it was cheap like everything else about my life. "Actually, I started, but Mom cut me off. "Darling, before you make excuses, Madison has wonderful news." She beamed at my sister, who practically glowed as she announced her second pregnancy. More congratulations, more reminders of what a real life looked like. I sank into my usual spot on the worn love seat, the one they'd relegated to the corner. "So, Chloe," Tyler smirked. "Already 3 beers in. Mom says you're dating someone? What is he, another struggling artist? Or wait, let me guess, an aspiring DJ." The laughter stung more than usual, because this time, I wasn't dating a nobody. But how could I tell them about Marcus without sounding delusional? A tech billionaire who'd built his empire from nothing, who'd spent the last 8 months flying me around the world, who'd just asked me to move in with him? They'd never believe it. "He's in tech," I said quietly, checking my phone. Marcus's text made me smile. "ETA 20 minutes. Helipad was full, had to circle. Can't wait to finally meet them." "Tech support?" Dad snorted. "Well, at least it's steady work." "Not exactly," I muttered, but Madison was already launching into her birth plan. I sat there, invisible again, counting down the minutes. They had no idea what was about to walk through that door. No idea that their favorite target practice was about to become the most successful person in the room. My phone buzzed again. "Actually, make that 10 minutes. Found a spot." "Your boyfriend's just an edit," Dad said suddenly, pointing at my phone screen where Marcus's photo had appeared briefly. "That's what you kids do now, right? Photoshop yourselves with models." The whole family burst into laughter, Tyler actually slapping his knee like this was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. My cheeks burned. "He's not." "Oh, honey." Mom patted my hand with that pitying look I'd grown to hate. "You don't need to pretend with us. We know dating is hard at your age, especially when you're between careers." Between careers. That's what she called my last 2 years of rebuilding my life after my fashion magazine folded. She didn't know about the consulting work, the connections I'd rebuilt, or how I'd met Marcus at a charity gala I was coordinating. "Remember when she said she was dating that French photographer?" Madison chimed in, rubbing her belly. "And he turned out to be some kid from New Jersey with an Instagram account?" "That was 10 years ago," I protested weakly. One mistake in college, and they'd never let me forget it. My phone vibrated. "Marcus. Just landed. Your neighbor's staring at the helicopter like he's seen a UFO. Should I be worried?" I stood up abruptly. "I need to—" "Sit down, Chloe," Dad commanded. "Your imaginary boyfriend can wait. We're discussing Tyler's promotion to regional manager." Of course we were. Everything was always about their successes. I sank back down, my heart racing. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of Mrs. Henderson next door, indeed gaping at something in the distance. "You know what your problem is." Tyler leaned forward, his voice taking on that big brother knows best tone. "You always aim too high. Remember when you thought you'd be editor of Vogue by 25? Maybe if you'd been realistic, settled for something achievable. The doorbell rang. My stomach dropped. I'll get it. I practically leaped up, but Dad was already heading to the door, muttering about solicitors on Sunday. I heard the door open, then complete silence. Even from the living room, I could hear the faint whir of helicopter blades in the distance. Sorry I'm late. Marcus's deep voice carried clearly. The helipad was full, 3 other choppers ahead of me. I'm Marcus Chen. You must be Mr. Morrison. Chloe's told me so much about you. The silence stretched so long, I thought time had stopped. Then Dad's voice, 2 octaves higher than normal. The helipad? I watched from the living room archway as Marcus stepped inside, looking like he'd walked off a magazine cover in his tailored Tom Ford jacket and designer jeans. Not flashy, just expensive in that understated way my family wouldn't recognize. Dad stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, while Marcus waited patiently with that easy confidence I'd fallen for 8 months ago. Is there a problem with parking? Marcus asked, genuinely concerned. I told my pilot to land at the country club down the road. They said it was fine for an hour or 2. Your pilot? Mom had appeared behind Dad, her face cycling through expressions I'd never seen before. Where are my manners? Marcus smiled warmly, extending his hand. Mrs. Morrison, it's such a pleasure to finally meet you. Chloe talks about your Sunday dinners all the time. I'm sorry it took so long to make it to one. The living room had gone cemetery quiet. I could feel everyone staring as I moved to Marcus's side, his arm naturally finding its way around my waist. Tyler's beer was frozen halfway to his lips. Madison's mouth hung open, her hand still on her belly. This is Marcus Chen, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. My boyfriend. The Marcus Chen? Tyler finally sputtered. As in Chen Tech? As in the 35-year-old who just sold his AI company for $2 billion? Marcus squeezed my waist gently. The very same, though the media always exaggerates these things. It was actually 1.8 billion. He said it like he was correcting the price of milk, not discussing more money than my entire family would see in 10 lifetimes. Dad's face had turned an interesting shade of purple. But Chloe said you were in tech support. No, I corrected quietly. I said he was in tech. You assume the rest. The silence that followed was deafening. 8 months of keeping this secret, of listening to their jokes, of being treated like a failure, it all crystallized in this moment. Marcus must have felt me tense because he turned to me with such genuine affection. It made my chest tight. Should I not have mentioned the helicopter? He whispered, just loud enough for everyone to hear. You did say to be myself. You're perfect, I whispered back, meaning it. Mom finally found her voice, pitched artificially high. Well, let's all move to the dining room, shall we? I'll just set another place. The good china. I'll get the good china. The dining room became a circus of forced smiles and sudden interest in my life. Dad, who hadn't asked about my work in 2 years, suddenly wanted to know all about my consulting business. Madison kept touching her hair and adjusting her dress, while Tyler Googled Marcus under the table, his eyes widening with each search result. So, Chloe, Mom chirped, placing the Waterford crystal glasses she'd inherited from Grandma, the ones I'd never been trusted to use, at our places. Why didn't you tell us you were dating someone so accomplished? I felt Marcus's hand find mine under the table. Maybe because every time I mentioned him, you all laughed, I said quietly. The uncomfortable silence was broken by Tyler clearing his throat. Forbes says you're developing some kind of revolutionary AI healthcare platform? We are, Marcus replied pleasantly, but his thumb was stroking my palm in that way he did when he sensed I was upset. Actually, Chloe's been instrumental in our user experience research. Her background in media gave us insights our tech team completely missed. Chloe's helping with billion-dollar tech? Dad's voice dripped skepticism. That did it. 8 months of biting my tongue, of protecting them from how their words affected me, of hiding this relationship because I knew exactly how they'd react. It all came flooding out. Yes, Dad. Chloe's helping. The same Chloe you call a failure every Sunday. The same one whose apartment you've never visited because it's probably depressing. The same daughter you introduced at the club last month as our other one, still finding herself. My voice cracked on the last words. Honey, we never, Mom started. You literally said it 2 hours ago. The words tumbled out faster now. Called me the family disappointment. Laughed when Dad said Marcus was just an edit. Do you know why I didn't tell you about him? Because I knew you'd either think I was lying or suddenly pretend you'd always believed in me. Marcus squeezed my hand tighter. I told him everything during our long nights together. How my family's doubt had become a voice in my head. How their jokes had made me question every good thing that happened to me, including him. We were just joking, Tyler muttered, not meeting my eyes. No. Marcus spoke up, his voice calm but firm. You were bullying. There's a difference. He turned to me with such tenderness it made my eyes burn. Though I have to thank you all for one thing. Your lack of faith in Chloe made her work twice as hard to prove herself. It's what caught my attention at that charity gala. She'd organized the entire event solo after her team bailed, and still made it look effortless. Dad's face flushed deep red. How dare you speak to us that way in our own home? The home where I'm only welcome as your punching bag? I stood up, my napkin falling to the floor. Where every single week I sit and smile while you all take shots at me. Drama queen. As always, Madison muttered, and something inside me snapped completely. You want to know what really happened in New York, Madison? Since you love telling everyone I failed? My hands trembled, but my voice was steel. My magazine didn't just fold. Richard Klein, the owner, your friend's husband, the one you all thought was so wonderful, he sabotaged it, pulled funding after I refused to sleep with him, blacklisted me with every major publication in the city. But I couldn't tell you that, could I? Because you'd already decided I was a failure who couldn't make it in the big city. The room went silent. Mom's face had gone pale. Chloe, why didn't you? Because when I tried to tell you something was wrong, you said I was making excuses. Dad literally said, winners don't blame others for their failures. Marcus stood up beside me, his presence solid and reassuring. She rebuilt everything from scratch, started consulting, built a client base that includes 3 Fortune 500 companies. She organized the gala where we met, a $1 million fundraiser, with 2 days' notice after the previous coordinator had a nervous breakdown. But she never told us any of this, Tyler protested weakly. When? I laughed bitterly. Between the jokes about my studio apartment and my imaginary boyfriends, or maybe during the lectures about how Madison managed to have it all while I was still finding myself at 32. Marcus pulled out his phone, showing them a photo. This is from last month. Chloe speaking at the Women in Business Conference in Geneva, keynote speaker. 2,000 attendees. Another swipe. This is her apartment, which, by the way, is a penthouse in Tribeca, not a studio. Another. This is us at the Met Gala, which she attended as a consultant for 3 different celebrities. My family stared at the photos like they were looking at a stranger. In a way, they were. They'd been so busy seeing me as their predetermined failure that they'd missed who I'd become. We didn't know, Mom whispered. Because you didn't ask. You just assumed. I picked up my purse with shaking hands. And the saddest part? I kept coming back, hoping that maybe this week would be different, that maybe you'd see me. Chloe, please, Dad started, but Marcus cut him off. With all due respect, Mr. Morrison, I think you've said enough. For months. His voice was ice. The woman you've been mocking is the strongest person I know. She survived betrayal, rebuilt her career, and still showed up here every Sunday to be humiliated by her own family. I wouldn't have lasted one dinner. Wait, Tyler said suddenly, his face twisted with something I'd never seen before. Shame. Richard Klein? The Richard Klein who Dad plays golf with? Who was at Madison's wedding? I nodded, my throat tight. The same one Dad called a real success story last Christmas, right in front of me. Dad sank into his chair like someone had cut his strings. For the first time in my life, he looked small. I didn't know, Chloe. You have to believe me. But you didn't want to know, I said softly. It was easier to have me as the family failure. Every family needs one, right? Madison's the perfect one. Tyler's the successful one. And I'm the cautionary tale you tell your friends' kids. Madison finally spoke, her voice uncharacteristically quiet. Is that really how you see us? How you see me? You announced your pregnancy by saying, at least one Morrison daughter knows how to build a life. Madison, what exactly was I supposed to think? She flinched like I'd slapped her. Good. Let them feel a fraction of what I'd felt every Sunday for 2 years. Mom was crying now, mascara running. We love you, Chloe. We've always loved you. You loved the idea of me being less than you, I corrected. It made you all feel better about yourselves. Every joke, every dig, every poor Chloe comment. It wasn't love. It was cruelty dressed up as concern. Marcus stepped forward. I think we should go. No. Dad stood up, and for a moment I saw something desperate in his eyes. Please don't leave like this. I need to say something. He took a shaky breath. I've been a terrible father. I saw you struggling, and instead of helping, I kicked you while you were down. Because maybe it was easier than admitting I didn't know how to help, that my little girl had grown beyond anything I understood. The words hung in the air. Real words. Finally. But were they enough? Do you know why I kept coming back? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Because I kept hoping that one day, just once, you'd be proud of me. Not because of Marcus or money or success. Just proud of me. I am proud, Dad said brokenly. I've always been proud. I was just too stupid and stubborn to show it. Too wrapped up in my own ideas of what success looked like to see that you'd already achieved it. Tyler stood up too. Chloe, God, I'm sorry. We turned you into a punchline because it was easier than admitting you were braver than any of us. You left. You took risks. We all just stayed safe. I felt Marcus's hand on my back, steady and sure. The family I'd built, him, my real friends in New York, my chosen family, they'd never made me feel less than. They'd never needed me to be small so they could feel big. Madison hadn't said anything else, just sat there with her hand on her belly, tears streaming down her face. Finally, she looked up at me. Do you remember when we were kids? You were always the brave one. Jumping off the high dive first, standing up to bullies, going to New York when everyone said you were crazy. Her voice cracked. Somewhere along the way, I started resenting you for it. Because I did everything right, everything safe, and you still had something I didn't. Courage. The confession hit me harder than all their mockery ever had. Madison? No, let me finish. When you came back from New York, I was relieved. Because it meant I'd made the right choice staying here, playing it safe. Every joke, every dig. I was trying to convince myself, not you. She stood up shakily. I'm having another baby with a man I barely talk to anymore, in a house I hate, living a life that looks perfect in Christmas cards. And you? You were brave enough to fail and try again. I've been jealous of my failure sister this whole time. The room felt too small suddenly, too full of raw truth. Marcus's hand found mine again, grounding me. The question is, I said slowly, looking at each of them, what happens now? Because I can't go back to the way things were. I won't sit through another dinner where I'm the punchline. Things will be different, Mom said quickly. Will they? I interrupted. Or is this just because Marcus walked in? Would you be apologizing if he was actually tech support? If I'd shown up alone again? The silence that followed was answer enough. Even now, confronted with everything, they couldn't lie about that. I need time, I said finally, to figure out if I can trust you again, if I even want to. I looked at Marcus. We should go. As we moved toward the door, Dad called out, will you come back? Not next Sunday, I understand, but someday? I turned back, seeing them all clearly for perhaps the first time. My family, flawed and cruel, and maybe possibly capable of change. I don't know, Dad. I honestly don't know. Marcus opened the door for me, and I could hear the distant sound of the helicopter warming up. As we walked down the path, Tyler ran out after us. Chloe, wait! He caught up, breathing hard. I need you to know something. It wasn't just because of Marcus. I mean, yeah, that opened our eyes, but I've been thinking about calling you for months. Every time I got promoted, every time something good happened, I felt sick about how we treated you. I was too much of a coward to admit it. I studied my brother's face, seeing genuine pain there. Why tell me now? Because you're about to get in that helicopter and maybe never come back. And I couldn't live with that. He pulled something from his pocket, a crumpled business card. My therapist. I started seeing him 6 months ago. He's helped me understand a lot about why I needed to make you small to feel big. I'm working on it. We all should be. I took Tyler's business card, something shifting in my chest. As the helicopter lifted off, I pressed my face against the window, watching my childhood home shrink below us. My family stood in the driveway, looking up. Mom clutching Dad's arm, Madison holding her belly, Tyler shielding his eyes from the wind. They looked smaller from up here. Or maybe I was finally seeing them actual size. You okay? Marcus asked through the headset, his voice cutting through the engine noise. I don't know, I answered honestly. The tears came then, 2 years' worth that I'd held back through every cruel Sunday dinner. I wanted them to love me, just me. Not me with a billionaire boyfriend, not me despite my failures. Just me. They do love you, Marcus said carefully. They just loved their idea of themselves more. Below us, the Connecticut countryside spread out like a patchwork quilt, and I thought about all the Sundays I'd driven these roads, stomach in knots, preparing for another round of emotional target practice. Tyler's in therapy. 6 months. He never said anything. People change, Chloe. The question is whether you want to be around while they do it. I wiped my eyes, grateful for the privacy of the helicopter. What would you do? Honestly, I'd probably never speak to them again, but I'm not you. He reached over, taking my hand. You have something I've never had, the ability to hope people can be better than they are. It's what made me fall in love with you, watching you organize that charity gala after your entire team abandoned you. You could have been bitter, angry. Instead, you created something beautiful. That was different. Those were strangers. Were they? Or were you practicing for today, showing up even when people let you down, hoping for better? I thought about that as we flew toward Manhattan, toward the life I'd built without them. My apartment with its skyline views, my work that challenged me, friends who celebrated my victories and held me through defeats. Marcus, who'd seen me at my worst, crying over family dinners, doubting myself after particularly cruel comments, and loved me anyway. The thing is, I said slowly, I'm not sure I need their approval anymore. I spent so long chasing it, but sitting in that dining room today, watching them scramble to rewrite history, I realized I've already built everything I wanted, without them. So why did we go? Because I needed to stop being their secret shame. I needed them to see who I really am, even if they can't appreciate it. I squeezed his hand, and I needed to stop protecting them from the consequences of their cruelty. As Manhattan's lights appeared on the horizon, my phone buzzed with texts. Madison, please don't give up on us. Mom, we love you. We failed you. Please let us try again. Dad, I'm proud of who you are. I'm ashamed of who I've been. And Tyler, started therapy after meeting your friend Natalie at that coffee shop. She told me how you light up rooms you walk into. Made me realize I'd been trying to dim that light. I'm sorry. Natalie, my best friend who'd accidentally run into Tyler 6 months ago. She'd planted a seed that took this long to grow. Maybe that was how change worked. Slowly, invisibly, until suddenly it wasn't. 3 months later, I stood in my Tribeca apartment, looking at the invitation in my hand. Madison's baby shower. The thick cardstock trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from the November wind whipping through the open balcony door where Marcus was grilling dinner. You don't have to go, he said, appearing beside me with 2 glasses of wine. You don't owe them anything. I know. And I did know. The past 3 months had been a masterclass in boundaries, weekly therapy, where I'd unpacked years of internalized criticism, saying no to the first few Sunday dinner invitations, letting their calls go to voicemail when I wasn't ready to talk. But I'd also watched them try. Dad had cut ties with Richard Klein, publicly and loudly. Tyler had sent me his therapy notes, pages of revelations about toxic masculinity and family dynamics. Mom had started her own therapy. And Madison. Madison had left her husband and moved back home, 7 months pregnant, and finally admitting she'd rather be a single mom than a married ghost. The thing is, I said, leaning into Marcus's warmth, I'm not going for them. I'm going for me. To see if I can be in that space without shrinking, without becoming who they need me to be. The baby shower was different from any family gathering I'd attended, not because of the decorations or the guests, but because of me. When Aunt Patricia made a snide comment about my fancy city life, I didn't defend or deflect. I simply said, yes, I love my life, and moved on. When Mom's friend asked about marriage plans with that rich boyfriend, I smiled and said, we're happy as we are, without feeling the need to explain further. Madison found me on the back porch, the same spot where she'd announced her first pregnancy while I'd been freshly back from New York, wounded and lost. You look different, she said quietly. I am different. She nodded, hands on her belly. I'm naming her Charlotte, after you, because I want her to be brave like her aunt. Her voice broke. I want her to know it's okay to fail and try again, to build a life that's actually hers. Madison, I'm getting divorced, she continued, moving to the city after she's born. I got accepted to NYU's business program. Part-time, but still. She looked at me with something I'd never seen before. Respect. I'm 34 years old, and I'm finally doing what you did at 22, following a dream instead of a checklist. I hugged my sister then, feeling the baby kick between us. It's never too late to be brave. When I left the shower, I didn't feel lighter or heavier. I felt complete. The family I'd grown up in was broken, maybe irreparably. But from those cracks, something new was growing. Not forgiveness exactly. Some wounds cut too deep for that. But understanding, acceptance, and most importantly, the knowledge that their opinion of me had never been about me at all. That night, I found myself back at another family dinner, but this one was different. It was Thanksgiving, and for the first time, I was hosting. My apartment, my rules, my guest list. Marcus carved the turkey while Natalie poured wine. My chosen family filled the spaces around my dining table. Colleagues who'd become friends, mentors who'd believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. And yes, Tyler was there. Just Tyler. He'd earned his seat through months of genuine work, not because of blood, but because of choice. He sat quietly, learning how conversation worked when it wasn't at someone's expense. "I need to tell you all something," I said, standing with my glass raised. The room quieted, faces turning toward me with warmth, not judgment. 2 years ago, I thought success meant earning my family's approval. I spent every Sunday letting them chip away at me, believing their version of who I was. A disappointment, a failure, someone who aimed too high and fell too hard. Marcus reached for my free hand, steady as always. "But here's what I learned. The people who truly love you don't need you to be less so. They can feel like more. They celebrate your wins without making them about themselves. They hold space for your losses without turning them into lessons about your character." I looked around the table at these faces, my real family. They see you, not the version of you that makes them comfortable. To chosen family. Natalie raised her glass, and the chorus of agreement that followed filled my chest with warmth. Later, as we cleaned up, Tyler pulled me aside. "Mom asked me to give you this." He handed me an envelope. I didn't read it, but she wanted you to know there's no pressure to respond. I tucked it into a drawer, unopened. Maybe I'd read it someday. Maybe I wouldn't. The beautiful thing was that it didn't matter anymore. My worth wasn't tied to their words, their approval, or their apologies. "You know what the hardest part was?" I told Marcus later as we stood on the balcony, Manhattan glittering below us. Realizing that they did love me. They just loved me wrong. They loved me small, contained, fitting into the box they'd built, and I had to choose between their love and my life. Do you regret it? The confrontation? No, because now I know. I didn't lose my family that day. I'd lost them years ago, the first time I made myself smaller to make them comfortable. That Sunday, I just finally admitted it. As I stood there, 32 years old, successful on my own terms, loved by people who saw my light instead of trying to dim it, I thought about everyone watching this who might be sitting at their own family table, shrinking to fit. The truth is, you can't make people see you if they're committed to looking at who they think you should be. You can only choose whether to keep showing up for their version of you or to finally, bravely, show up for yourself. Sometimes, the most courageous thing you can do is admit that the people who should love you best might actually love you least. And that's not your failure. It's theirs. Now tell me, what would you do if you were in my place? Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and comment where you're watching from.